Hello everyone, we are on chapter 9 and we are on paragraph 6. The ego consciousness is built upon the human organization. Out of the latter flows our acts of will. Following the lines of the preceding argument, we can gain insight into the connections between thinking, conscious I, and act of will only by observing first how an act of will issues from the human organization. And 6 is summarized as follows. Our acts of will flow out of our human organization. So basically, he's saying in this paragraph that our will is coming from our human organization, and we're going to gain insight into this connection of thinking, conscious I, and the act of will by observing how an act of will issues from our human organization. So we're going to move on to paragraph 7. In any particular act of will, we must take into account the motive and the driving force. The motive is a factor with the character of a concept or a mental picture. The driving force is the will factor belonging to the human organization and directly conditioned by it. The conceptual factor or motive is the momentary determining factor of the will. The driving force is the permanent determining factor of the individual. A motive for the will may be a pure concept, or else a concept with a particular reference to a percept, that is, a mental picture. Both general concepts and individual ones, that is, mental pictures, become motives of will by affecting the human individual and determining him to action in a particular direction. But one and the same concept or one and the same mental picture affects different individuals differently. They stimulate different men to different actions. An act of will, therefore, is not merely the outcome of the concept or the mental picture, but also of the individual makeup of the person. Here we may well follow the example of Edward von Hartmann and call this individual makeup the characterological disposition. The manner in which concept and mental picture affects the characterological disposition of a man gives to his life a definite moral or ethical stamp. And 7 is summarized as follows. When analyzing an act of will, we must take into consideration the motive and the driving force. The motive is the mental picture of or conceptual factor, and it is the momentary factor of the will. The driving force is the will factor, and it is the permanent factor of the individual. The difference between the two is that we are usually conscious of our motive, but may not be conscious of our driving force. An act of will is also dependent on the characterological disposition of the individual, as concepts and mental pictures affect people differently and stimulates people to different actions. Now, in this paragraph, I made a note that driving force in the other translation is the word motive power is expressed. So we're just going to use driving force. If I say driving force and you have the other translation, it just means motive power. So that's just what I want to point out. He's pointing out here, actually, if you read the introduction, he has, I don't know if it's in the other translation, but in mine he lists various terms, and he talks about the term motive and driving force, and I think it's important to understand what these are, because in the paragraph, in this introduction paragraph, he says what a motive is a motive has to be by nature conscious, because we already have the mental picture or the concept of what we're going to do. And driving force is really an unconscious motive, and that term in itself is sort of a contradiction, because it says here, it implies that some other person has been able to grasp the concept which was the reason for the action, though the person acting was not himself aware of it. He acted as an automaton, or as we properly say, without motive. So there are times in our lives when we do things and we're not really conscious of what we're doing. We're not conscious of our motives, and we're just, pushing our way through it through our will. And so that is sort of the driving force, because we're not really quite conscious yet. We haven't risen to that level where we grasp that. And at the end of this introductory paragraph here, in the beginning of the book, the point has been made that Steiner has been able to characterize all possible levels of action, from the purely instinctive to the completely free deed. So somebody who operates from the level of a driving force is really operating on an instinctual level, whereas someone who has a motive, they're operating more consciously and therefore are more free, because for Steiner, we have to think about conscious acts and unconscious acts, and acts that are done consciously are free acts. And so basically that's what he's pointing out in this paragraph. He's just pointing out the distinction between a conscious motive and an unconscious motive. Unconscious motive is the term driving force, and a motive is something that is always changing. I can always change my motive for things. And somebody's who operates at an instinctual level, that's sort of a more permanent thing. It takes quite an effort to get from that level to a more conscious level as well. So that's what he's pointing out, what a motive is in the driving force. And also in this paragraph, it talks about how I might have the same mental picture or concept as someone else, but it affects us to different actions. And so an act of will, as mentioned, is not merely the outcome of the concept or the mental picture, but also of our individual makeup of the person. And Steiner uses the expression characterological disposition. Characterological disposition is just our own individual makeup of a person, our temperament and whatnot. All that is encompassed by that term, and so that is what also affects our will. So our will isn't just affected by, whether it's conscious or not, our motives, but also by our own personality and our individual makeup, because we are different motives stimulate people to different outcomes and different actions. So that's what he's pointing out in this paragraph. So that's all what we're going to cover for today. So have a good day. Bye.